Welcome to this community energy training session with Northern Powergrid. Good to see so many people on the call already. So if you can, as you're joining, please rename yourselves with your full name and organisation, just so we know who's in the room. You can do that by clicking on the three little dots in the top right-hand corner of your picture and clicking rename. Do introduce yourselves in the chat. We want this session to be as interactive as possible. So yeah, introduce yourselves, say where you're joining us from. Please do keep your cameras on throughout if you're comfortable with that, but do keep yourselves on mute unless you're speaking, just so that we can reduce any background noise. Looks like we've got most people in the session now, so I will kick off. Welcome everyone to this Northern Powergrid Community Energy Training Session on funding. My name's George Middlemiss and I work for Regen. I'm a local energy analyst, and we've been working with Northern Powergrid for the past 4 years on their programme of support for the community energy sector in their region. We're running this session today as a result of feedback that we received in previous sessions. Funding is a topic that comes up a lot, and I think that judging by the sign-ups we got for today, it's a very popular topic. So I hope that it delivers everything that you are hoping. We've got a great agenda packed full of experts highlighting different funding streams and different ways of raising funding, and lots of expertise in the room with plenty of time for questions. So please do have a think about any questions you might have for them, and yeah, we'll get to the questions later on. I will run through the agenda very quickly, but you should have all received one in your in an email this morning. So just to highlight that we've got 3 presentations, and then we'll be going into breakout groups, which will be an opportunity to meet your fellow attendees and share tips with each other and offer some sort of peer-to-peer learning. And then after the breakout groups, we'll be having a 5-minute tea break before coming back at 11:15 for 2 more presentations, and then a Q&A just before we wrap up. On the Q&A, please do put your questions in the Q&A function on Zoom, and do upvote other people's questions if you are keen to see them answered. Just to note as well that the slides will be sent around, so no need to frantically take notes of everything that's said, and lots of the slides from the speakers contain links to further information, so you'll have access to that after the session as well. At the end of the session, we will be asking you for a bit of feedback, and that's really important for us to know what sorts of topics to cover at future sessions, so please do stick around and provide us with that feedback. That's everything from me for now. I'm hoping to hand over to Connor, but I know he had some problem joining this morning, so just want to check that Connor is there, and if not, we can come back to Connor later on. Are you there? It seems not. So in that case, we will move straight on to our first speaker. Oh, actually, I've forgotten to tell you lots of things that I was supposed to tell you. As well as the funding streams that you're going to hear about today, Northern Powergrid also have their own funding stream, which is the Net Zero Community Energy Fund, and this will be running again for the 3rd time in 2024, and it's grants from 1 to 10,000 for community energy groups or community energy projects in their region. It will be opening in April, so keep your eyes peeled for that, and yeah, look forward to hearing your applications. Best place to look is on the Northern Powergrid website. And just to highlight the other things coming up this year, we have the Northern Powergrid regional forums, and they are in March. I believe some of them are next week, and there will be a link to sign up to those in the email that you'll receive after this. The fund launching in April, which I mentioned, the in-person community forums happening in July, the 3rd and 4th of July. One will be in Yorkshire and one will be in the North East. And then we have a final training session in October. The topic for the training session isn't yet decided, so again, please do send us your ideas in the feedback form later on. That is everything I've got to say. I'll just check one more time to see if Connor's there. Connor? In that case, we'll move on to Lisa. Take it away, Lisa.
Hi, thanks, George. Hi, everybody. It's really nice to be here today. My name's Lisa West. I'm the Membership and Operations Officer from Community Energy England. So I'm here to talk a little bit about what we do, a bit about the funding landscape, and how we can support you with funding. So next slide, please. So for those of you who aren't familiar with Community Energy England, I thought I'd give you a bit of background to who we are and what we do. We were founded in 2014 by practitioners within the community energy sector. And our mission is to create the conditions in which community energy can thrive and scale. We are a membership organisation and we have just over 295 members, the vast majority being community energy organisations, with some supportive stakeholder groups, corporates and local authorities. And our members are really core to our mission and purpose. All of our work is intended to help clear barriers, obstacles and build capacity for the sector and for our members. And we really want to enable community energy organisations to increase the range and scale of their activities. We do this in two main ways. Firstly, we help our members meet each other, share expertise and help each other solve problems, building capacity through resources and training. We have an extensive annual calendar of events. We conduct research on the sector, provide guidance and research and host 2 online forums for our members. We have an all-member forum and a practitioner-only forum for our members to share expertise and challenges and really help make the connections to develop their organisations and work. Secondly, we do a lot of policy and advocacy work where we work to make politicians, national and local government officials and network operators aware of community energy benefits, the needs and opportunities and obstacles from regulation and policy that really hold our sector back. To do this, we build and maintain relationships and advocacy channels with a wide range of policymakers, MPs, Ofgem and political parties. And we respond to consultations about policy and regulatory changes. This is really to ensure that the community energy sector is able to grow and release its potential as an essential part of the UK's energy transformation. So if you're not yet a member, but you'd like to find out more, then please do reach out to me and I can share some information with you. So thanks, George. Next slide. So the funding landscape. So I wanted to touch briefly on the Community Energy Fund. CEE really welcomed the government's 10 million Community Energy Fund, which opened in the autumn last year. As the Community Energy Fund becomes a reality, our determination knows no bounds, and we are really committed to ensuring the success of this fund. It's a vital fund, and it's really vital to claim all of this fund to show that community energy is capable, it's enterprising, and it's ready to grow again. If this government stays in power, we will be lobbying for a CEF2. The sector needs more funding, and it's a really significant increase in funding that we need. So we will be lobbying for more. We have a dedicated CEF webpage, which has all the context for the regional hubs and a pre-recorded CEF webinar, which we hosted with the hubs in the autumn last year. So I would encourage you to have a look at that page. There may be some information and resources that could help you with your CEF applications. We also hold regional meetings with the hubs to feedback about how CEF is going. We're very keen to feedback to the hubs. We want feedback to help shape future rounds of this CEF and future CEFs. So if you have any feedback about how you found the process, you're welcome to share that with me so we can feed that back into those meetings. There is an up-and-coming election at some point this year. We're not sure when it's going to be just yet, but Labour in its local power plan has pledged significant support to community energy. It's hundreds of millions of pounds in low interest loans to communities and of capital grants to local authorities, which will include capacity building grants for community energy. So if that happens, partnering with your local authority will be vital. It would be a different funding model, but it really could mean that we could meet our 2030 vision of 12 to 20-fold growth. And I'll share some further information and links to our 2030 vision following this presentation. I'd really encourage you to visit the election planning page on our website. It's got lots of ideas about how you can raise the importance of the government supporting community energy and good climate action leading up to the election, and really to help get a result that will transform the future of the sector. We are also campaigning for the Energy Redress Main Fund to be opened up to community businesses. At the moment, we are really encouraging community energy organisations to apply for the Innovation and Carbon Emissions Reduction Fund, which is part of the main fund. It's 25% of the total, but it still equates to millions of pounds. The 7th round of this has just closed, but we have a dedicated webpage again specifically for this fund, and we update it as soon as we learn of new rounds opening up. So do keep your eye on that. Thanks, George. Next. So there are different types of categories of funding available to community energy organisations. I thought it might be useful to explain what these are and kind of the different routes of funding that you could use. So firstly, we've got feasibility, figuring out what kinds of activities are possible, what kind of energy activities are possible, and what is likely to be suitable for your group's location and priorities. And then the development, so for designing a project or service, and then the capital for the installation of energy generation. So there is a standard model of community energy. So you get grants for feasibility and development work, and then you'd open a share offer to kind of raise the capital funding to install the generation. The Community Energy Fund is good because it will actually fund the feasibility and development part. So there are an increasing number of other revolving funds offering bridging loans that can help with getting projects installed more quickly by bridging the gap between the development and then raising the capital share income. So once an organisation has several installations, it can then start using the surplus income to fund feasibility and development work of future projects. So grant funding, if your organisation operates a car service or an energy efficiency service, this ongoing service use revenue will be needed to make the service viable. So energy advice services will likely need to be grant funded initially until an organisation reaches sufficient scale with generating renewable energy to then cross-subsidise these services internally. So you might use grant funding for a little bit until you're in a position to then use kind of surplus income that you're generating through energy generation. And as I've already mentioned, large-scale central government funds. These funds are channeled through local authorities. We find that funds such as the Levelling Up Fund and Public Sector Decarbonisation Scheme are still there, but are perhaps becoming a little bit less relevant for the sector, whereas CEF has now become much more relevant. Again, it's one of the reasons why we need the sector to oversubscribe to CEF. We want to show the government that there is demand and the return on their investment that this grant produces is worthwhile. And then finally, working with established community energy organisations. So these established groups can provide funding and support for newer groups. And some examples of these, and it's not inclusive, are Solar for Schools, Schools Energy Co-op, Energy for All. I know we've got Paul on this call speaking later. Big Solar Co-op and Communities for Renewables are just a few of those kind of well-established groups. You'll also find organisations such as Unity and Repowered Communities who have bridging and revolving funds that you can apply for. And I can share further information on both of those organisations so you can find out more about that. Funding streams. So there are a range of other funding sources available, but it is a bit of a patchwork across the country. So key places for you to look at really are your local authorities and combined authorities to see if they have community energy or climate change funds available. Social enterprise funding from local authorities or others can be really useful to help grow your organisation. And CE does have a really well-resourced funding webpage, and we've got lots of sources of funding there, but I've noted a few here, really just partly to illustrate that there are some regional funds, like the West Yorkshire Community Climate Grant one, and then some national funds like the ones that I've already touched on, so the Energy Redress and CEF, which I've mentioned earlier. So we do know that feasibility funding can be a really big challenge for community energy. We are aware of that, but again, it's one of the reasons why CEF is so valuable at the moment to the sector. And finally, for funding streams, community share offers. They are one of the main ways that community energy organisations raise capital funding to enable their installations of renewable energy. We have a webpage of open share offers that we are aware of that our members have, and we also have some really, really good guidance about how to do a share offer. So I'll share that link with you following the webinar. But if that's something that you are interested in learning more about, we can kind of signpost you to some really useful resources on how you might go about that. Thank you, George. Next slide. So how can CEE support you? I've mentioned we have frequent meetings with the hubs and with DESNES. We really want to get feedback from the sector back to them. It's key that they hear about funding needs and barriers. It's key that they hear about kind of the barriers and general challenges that we face as a sector. So please do share that with us if you would like to, and we can kind of make sure your voice is heard. I've mentioned our funding opportunities webpage. I really would encourage you to look there. It's updated kind of weekly. We share as much as we know about funding opportunities on that page. We also have a CEE YouTube channel. So we have all of our past webinars and kind of hosted webinars that we've done. We've got a funding webinar from our Community Energy Fortnight 2023 on there about funding applications, and it has lots of tips about how to do a successful funding application. And if you're not yet a member of CEE, I would encourage you to join us to help you become part of the broader network and movement of community energy. It'd help you stay up to date with what's happening across the sector and funding sources, and really help you connect with others in the sector and share your expertise. And of course, lending weight to our campaigning, including the up and coming election, which is hopefully a really important turning point for the sector. So please do reach out to me if you would like any more information on Community Energy England. Thanks, George. Next slide. So some top tips and key takeaways. I think for community energy organisations, it's really important to think about the best funding route for you and the type of funding category your organisation needs. What you might need now might be totally different to what you need in 18 months' time, depending on how you've grown and developed your work. So just have a think and investigate into the best route and category for what you're after. You can obviously ask Northern Powergrid, your DNO. George has already mentioned their fund, so do keep in touch with them and kind of keep up to date with what they're doing in terms of their community funds. Again, build strong relationships with your local authority. They are a key partner, a key relationship to your work, and some funds will really come via them. And speak to your local MP. Encourage them to come and visit your organisation, encourage them to come and see what you're doing, really spread the word about what you're doing, what you want to do, what you're aspiring to do. We've got some great templates of letters that you can send to your MP. You can find them on our election page, and you're welcome to take them away and share them with your organisation and others. But it really is about getting your voice out there, showing the importance of community energy within the sector, and really telling them why we need their funding. And yeah, look at the resources on our webpage. You can reach out to me at any point. I'd be happy to answer any questions. George has mentioned a Q&A session later on, so do pop any questions that you have for me there, and I'll pick those up with you then. So thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to speak today.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Yeah, that was a brilliant introduction to the world of funding for community energy. So thank you. Next up, I'll be handing over to Adele, who's going to give you the experience of a community organisation in applying for funding.
Okay, thank you, George. Yeah, my name's Adele Borrowman, and I work for the Methodist Church in Yorkshire, North and East Methodist District, and I'm the grants fundraising enabler. So this slide is a bit of an overview of some of our installations, just as a starting point. So next slide, please. Yeah, just briefly about us. We've got over 200 Methodist churches in the north and east of Yorkshire. We've 7,500 members, but most of our footfall comes through community use. So I think we have 3 to 4 million footfalls a year, and by and large, that's community users. As a church, we seek to challenge injustice and be a good neighbour to those in need. And obviously, climate change is a massive injustice, and that's one we're looking at. Our commitment is to net zero by 2040. So the projects I'm going to talk about are all aligned to that target. Next slide, please. Okay, so this slide just gives you an overview of some of that community use I was talking about with some of the organisations. Hopefully you'll be able to spot a few that you recognise, but cradle to grave is what we call it. Something for all ages happens in our Methodist churches. So next slide, please. In terms of the projects we've had on net zero to date, we started in 2020 when the commitment to net zero to 2040 was made after some work by Professor Simon Pringle to look at how we would achieve net zero. 28 of our 200 churches now have rooftop solar panels. As a district, we've supported 18 churches through group-led projects to have solar installations with battery storage. And we've raised 1.2 million since that 2020 start point through grants towards our net zero projects. Of those 18 that we've had solar and battery installed recently, we've also had a solar monitoring scheme with it, so that churches and those community users of our buildings can see what's being generated, so that we make solar more relevant and understandable for people that are using the building. So we did a bit of consultation on a metric that might speak to people, and different groups have different ideas, of course, but one universally popular one was a cup of tea. How much tea could you brew, or how many cups of tea could you brew with the solar power that you're generating? So we have a counter, and at the moment this church in Selby is up to 416,000 cups of tea could have been brewed with the solar panels that they put on their roof in June. So it's about finding a way to communicate the impact of the solar panels. So, and that's MP Kiamata opening the solar installation over a cup of tea. So next slide, please. Yeah, so this is the first group of churches that went through under this vision of T and PV, and you'll see there's a good spread of well, geography, building types, and across different sizes of community. So hopefully anybody from any other church or community building will be able to find some similarity with their own building. Next slide, please. Yes, so moving on to an example project and how it was funded, which is the bit we're all here for. This project here in South Holderness, just near Hull, was involved 3 churches. It was £62,000 worth of solar and battery. And what I want to say really is that there's no one funder. However many buildings or however much solar is in your project, very seldom is there just one funder involved. It's a range of organisations will help you get your project over the grant funded line. So we always start at home with our fundraising. And so the Methodist sources here in yellow, that represents our home fundraising efforts. That's what we could raise ourselves through local fundraising and grants local to the Methodist churches involved. Over half of the funding came from the North Eastern Yorkshire Net Zero Hub through the Enabling Fund, for which we're extremely grateful. Obviously, Enabling Fund really did its job here. By the term enabling, we couldn't have got this project through without it. And then a tiny slice of the pie in this case comes from the trusts and foundations who represent, I think there are 8,000 trusts and foundations in the UK, and not all of them will contribute to solar, but some will, and you can see here that some did. So if we move on to the next slide, we can talk a bit more about these types of funding. I think there are really 2 main strands, and then the other opportunities. So the main go-to, as far as experience is going to the statutory and government related sources. So always we've started with our Net Zero Hub, and from there we had the Rural Community Energy Fund, and from those conversations and those projects we've been able to find out what other opportunities are available. So always start there and find your regional hub from this list here. We've also been to the Landfill Communities Fund, previously, solar wouldn't have been eligible, but more and more solar projects are now viable, especially if you team them with something like insulation or other measures that will have a positive benefit to the community. So it's always worth checking. And by the landfill funders, I mean people like Amy, FCC, and other landfill providers. So it's Entrust, which I haven't got on this slide, but Entrust is the point of contact to find a landfill funder near you. Through your local authority, you can also find out about the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, and many different authorities are offering a decarbonisation strand or a net zero strand. So it's worth exploring that as an opportunity. The trusts and foundations, as I mentioned earlier, there are over 8,000 of them. There's nearly 3 billion per annum given out through trusts and foundations, but it's not always as easy to access. I think it's fairly competitive at the moment. Some trusts have as much as a 99% rejection rate. So it's really worth tailoring your application and finding out more before the point of application. Usually most trusts and foundations want to be the last to fund or towards the end of your project fundraising before they can help you. So some have limits of you must have 30% raised before you approach them, or 50%, and it's always worth checking those things. And then the other areas, there are ad hoc opportunities, such as the Energy for Tomorrow Fund with Centrica, and the Northern Powergrid Community Energy Fund, which we heard about. So, and those don't necessarily fit into either category, but we hear about them by these networking events and groups and being part of the conversations through your Net Zero Hub, etc. So if we move on to the next slide, just about how to find the funding, just like there is no one source for our projects, no single funder, there is no single source of resources for finding funding. Though I have to say the Community Energy England website is the great starting point for a go-to. Start online for whatever your project. You can start by looking online through these online resources here. Charity Excellence Frameworks, not just for charities, but it includes other models. So it's always worth registering your organisation there to see what grant funders can help you. And the UK community foundations, local pots are often available. So get in touch with those. Benefact Trust have advice and resources on their website, including how to write an application form to trusts and foundations. And for those of us in the north, particularly northwest, the TCC, which I think is Transforming Churches and Communities, have a great monthly bulletin with trusts and foundations willing to help. Also, things change, so always subscribe to updates and bulletins, and make contact with your local voluntary services. They have a grant search and may be able to find local links as well. And I think we've talked about the UK Shared Prosperity, and that's by making contact with your local authority, you'll be able to find out more. So last slide, please. Just a few top tips. I think don't write your application until you've formed your project. Know what your project is and that it lines up to what the funder's looking for before you write. Don't make your project something it's not. Make sure it suits the guidance, but don't stretch beyond what it really is. It's in nobody's interest to remorph your project entirely. However, what we can do, always read the guidance because things change. The grant giver produces and updates guidance for every new funding round, so look at it. And I think 3 things we really need to know when we apply is know your organisation inside out, your accounts, your vision, what your limits are in terms of what you can cope with as a project, where you want to go, and know your funders, who you're applying to. What are they looking for when you write that application? You need to know exactly what they're looking for to make sure it's a good fit. And know your project, what benefit it's really going to have. And only then can you write about it in a way that's helpful for the funder and a way that tells your story as it is. I think importantly, obviously be honest. We need to be optimistic and realistic at the same time, and collaborate, share what you're doing with others. It's not a secretive business, seeking funds and going for grants. We're only going to progress if we collaborate, share what works and what doesn't with others. Keep going, even when we're unsuccessful. I've got plenty of unsuccessful applications I could talk about. To get those successful ones, it's a learning curve. So, and as you write, picture success, try and cut the ribbon at the end of it, not the car charging cable, but picture that end result. And if you're unsuccessful, get feedback and learn from it. Last of all, try and be kind, because somebody has to read what you've written and score it against hundreds of other bids. So bear your reader in mind as you write. Thank you very much, George. I think I might have gone over slightly, so apologies.
No, that's brilliant. Thank you, Adele. Clearly a lot of expertise in raising funds, so really appreciate you sharing that with everyone. We've got a couple of minutes for questions. I can see that there are a couple in the Q&A, which I'll come to, but before I do, I just want to ask Adele, is there a big difference between, like you seem to apply for a lot of range of funding, so you know, from quite significant portions to sort of quite small ones. Is there a big difference in the application process and the reporting process for both of those?
There can be. I think it's individual according to each funder. So one funder has the same criteria, no one, they're all different. So yes, pick up the phone and ask before you write the application what you're going to need to do for reporting. But yeah, they're all different, I think.
Yeah, great, thank you. If anyone else wants to pop a question in the Q&A, please do, or pop your hand up and I'll come to you. There's a question from Lawrence Barton from Weardale Renewables asking, did the grants for the Methodist schemes cover capital costs or just evaluation and development?
No, capital costs. Most of the funding has been capital funding. We've included some evaluation at the end of it, but yeah, 1.2 million for capital funds has come in. So
thank you for answering that one. I think there's a point more than a question from David. David, if there is a question in there, please add it in there again. Another question from me, Adele, is approximately, I mean, I imagine it differs quite a lot, but is there a sort of rule of thumb of how long it takes from going to writing an application for funding to actually getting something built?
Oh, I think it depends on the individual project and the timeline for getting decisions. I think some funders are very speedy in their decision-making process. Some I've put in bids 18 months ago and I'm still chasing responses. That really delays things. So I think the smaller the project, the quicker the timeline. And if you need to repeat and reapply for trusts and foundations, then you need to do it in cycles. So the bigger the cost, the longer it takes generally.
Right, yeah, that's very useful. Thank you. Thank you very much, Adele. Adele is going to be around for the Q&A later and in one of the breakout groups. So please do, if you have any more questions for Adele, ask them later on, or perhaps Adele can answer them in the chat as well. Right, with that, we'll move on to our next speaker. A slightly different perspective on fundraising now. And we're going to be hearing from Kinza from Space Hive about their exciting crowdfunding platform. I believe Kinza had some problems with her camera early on. I'm not sure if they're solved, but apologies if not. Are you there, Kinza?
Yeah, I'm here. They have not been solved. Sorry about that, guys. So you will just be hearing from a blank screen. But yeah, morning, everyone. It's been great to hear from the other speakers so far. We're really excited to kind of talk to you about Space Hive and more specifically around the unique benefit that, you know, community crowdfunding through Spacehive brings to net zero and sustainability ambitions. Next slide, please, George. So, you know, firstly, just by way of introduction to us at Spacehive, Spacehive is a digital crowdfunding platform for locally led projects that bring local places to life and transform them, innovative projects that, you know, kind of bring communities together and deliver some really valuable benefits for local people. Next slide, please, George. So we kind of acknowledge that development at the local level happens best when local people are the ones kind of in charge of delivering that and pulling those levers to engender that positive change that matters to them. And this is all kind of reflected in by our mission at the core of Spacehive. So we make it easy for people to improve their local areas. And we do this by working with partners in the public and the private sector, from local authorities to foundations of businesses that can connect these local projects with funding to kind of turbocharge their campaigns. Next slide, please, George. Now, this should kind of just give you a snapshot of how Spacehive has catalysed local transformations in and around the decade that we've been in action. So we've just recently hit the 30k mark for what's been raised for community projects across the UK and Ireland, which is obviously a really exciting development. And it means ultimately that these community groups nationwide have been able to unlock funds that fuel innovative and robust projects and build these from the ground up. And we'll get into a little bit later about the direct impact that this has had on local areas. But just a couple of quick stats to note. So, you know, 85% of projects on Spacehive hit their fundraising target, and they're able to take away those funds and deliver those really brilliant initiatives for their local areas. And a whopping 65% of project creators are actually fundraising for the very first time. So the main takeaway from that being, you know, that you're well taken care of when it comes to running a campaign with Spacehive. The platform is quite literally built for groups that have little to no experience of crowdfunding or other fundraising mechanisms even, and there'll be a little bit more on the direct support we provide later on in the presentation. Next slide, please, George. Now, these are just some of the testimonials from project creators who have crowdfunded through Spacehive previously. Project creators and their communities are at the very centre of what we do. So it's so integral to us because obviously, although the funds available via our programmes with local authorities are fantastic and they really do help to fuel brilliant campaigns, what we ultimately recognise is that so many of the benefits from crowdfunding do just come from the crowd. So whether that's developing new skills, building new relationships and raising the profile of the work community groups do, project creators come away with a really great sense of boost confidence, new connections, and they find themselves tapping into funding that may have, you know, otherwise been hard to access for them. Next slide, please, George. I mentioned earlier around, you know, new project creators being in safe hands with Spacehive as a platform, and these three main pillars are kind of just to expand on how exactly we offer that wraparound support. So similar to today, we host a number of project creator workshops and events based around our programs to set you up for success when it comes to launching a project. Beyond that, we kind of offer email support that extends to face-to-face, to phone support. So you're not alone at any point in your campaign, whether that's kind of, you know, in the pre-stages where you're building your campaign page to when you're actively crowdfunding. And of course, that last pillar there is kind of testament to, you know, there is also that funding that can really mobilize your campaign. Next slide, please, George. A little bit more on that funding itself. So as mentioned, Spacehive's been in action for over a decade. And within that time, we've kind of built partnerships with over 40 local authorities. And as you can see there, our network in the North East, we work with North Tyne Combined Authority and Kirklees Council, among others, to deliver crowdfunding programmes that focus on combining the distribution of council funding and crowdfunding itself for projects that sprout in those areas, and helps those projects and helps those groups kind of deliver really impactful projects that make those places, you know, vibrant and meet the needs of local people. A quick thing to note is, you know, we're always open to kind of partnering with local authority statutory organisations and other brands to expand the areas where local projects can tap into that funding. So, you know, if you'd like to find out more about our partnerships, my colleague Frank is in the chat and he's happy to pick up any conversations about this. Next slide, please, George. Over recent years, we've kind of seen a spike in sustainability, net zero driven projects, you know, as you'd expect. And this is particularly relevant in the North East. I'm going to talk through a couple of projects of note on the presentation today. So as part of our programme with the North Tyne Combined Authority, this project was by Kielder Observatory Astronomical Society, was funded in January of last year. Really, really exciting project. They've raised over 30k for a new wind turbine to keep the observatory running and to deliver over 700 public events per year. So, via Space Hive, they were connected with the North Tyne Combined Authority via the Crowdfund North Tyne programme, and they were then supported by a council pledge of £15,000. So really fantastic. It really helped to kind of turbocharge the campaign and kind of help them hit that target that they may otherwise not been able to do. But, it has had an enormous benefit to those local people there, and they're able to access those events and do so many great things with that. Next slide, please, George. Another project from kind of outside the northeast is the Jessie Hughes Village Hall. This is kind of a retrofit style project. So they raised over 14,000 for a battery to store electricity generated by recently installed solar panels. So really great project. They were also supported with council pledges from a number of the funds as part of our Cheshire West Crowd programme. And these are just a couple of the projects that have come through over recent years that have helped to kind of achieve net zero ambitions. They've been really great, huge targets, or ranging from small to large targets, to kind of make really profound impact in that area. Next slide, please, George. So you might be wondering, it's all great hearing about all the projects that have come through over recent years, but how exactly do I get involved? And I did mention previously that we do host a number of project creators on the platform who haven't crowdfunded previously. How do they get on the platform, and how are they able to hit these targets? Well, I won't go into too much detail about the crowdfunding process, but just to kind of give you an overview. Space Hive kind of works in a kind of 3-point process when it comes to building your campaign. So it starts with kind of building your project page, which comprises your kind of public facing shop window. The purpose of this being, ultimately to just give people some more information about what it is exactly you're looking to deliver as part of your campaign. And the ultimate goal is to ignite some support in the form of pledges. And the next step would be to pitch for funds. So it's where you ask the council as part of the programme you've been matched to directly for that pledge. So, for example, the projects that we've seen previously with North Tyne Combined Authority, those projects, when they did kind of build their project page and appeal to the general public, they then had to go in the back end of their project dashboard and pitch to the North Tyne Combined Authority to those funds there. And it gives kind of project creators the opportunity to divulge a little bit more information about what it is exactly you're looking to deliver and what the benefits of your project will bring to your local community. And ultimately also how it hits the eligibility for those funds and helps achieve any of those desired outcomes for the funds that they are pitching to. And the final step in the crowdfunding process is verification. You're required to kind of provide some more technical information about your project in order for our verification team to check whether your project's viable and deliverable. And it, involves uploading permissions and providing an itemized budget. It's all assessed very case by case, and it's a unique process to Space Hive to give people the confidence that their projects could not only kind of feasibly bring in pledges from the local community, but also potentially be eligible for that public funding. Next slide, please, George. We have, a range of really useful video resources, article resources on our Help Centre. Hopefully once you do kind of receive these slides following today's event, you'll be able to kind of click through and have a look around at your own pace about how to kind of build a great project page and all the various elements of the crowdfunding process. So we have all of this linked in our slide deck. Next slide, please, George. Just a little bit more. We have, everything from building a project page to pitching to the funds to costing the project and the verification process and more we have on our Help Centre, and these are really useful specialist guidance videos to help guide and help you navigate the process. Next slide, please, George. So just a little bit around kind of what we have coming up at the moment. So, it's really exciting, but we've recently launched our spring rounds. So what we often do at Space Hive is we run almost 2 rounds a year. We have a spring and an autumn round for most programs. So how it works for North Tyne is we've got that upcoming deadline for that pitch. So what that means is that you'd be required to kind of build your project page and pitch to the funds, get yourself verified by that 22nd of March deadline. Again, this is a hyperlink to the movement page that you can kind of have a look around on, look at the eligibility for the funds, what are they looking to see, how can you align your project with those desired outcomes, and ultimately grab a really great council pledge from Crowdfund North Tyne. And for some more details on currently open funding windows in and around the northeast and some other areas across the UK and nationwide, we do have our movement page linked there, so you can have a look around there and look at all of our upcoming pitch deadlines. And alongside that, I did mention earlier, we host a number of project creator workshops to kind of complement our round launches. So if you kind of want to register for any of those coming up, we've got that link there as well to our Eventbrite page, and please do have a look and see if anything of those applies to you. Next slide, please, George. So just some things to note about the SpaceHive platform. SpaceHive is an all or nothing platform. That is just a kind of general stipulation that we have to kind of allow you to hit your target faster, essentially. We find that if you have this kind of urgency to hit your target in order to be able to take any away the funds, it kind of instills that urgency onto your crowd, and that they're kind of looking to support you faster and better. In-kind contributions can be presented on your project. So these are, offline pledges or other ways that people in your local area can support your project. We allow for that on the platform itself. So that's a really, really great way of kind of, boosting the profile of your organization, but also, helping you hit your target faster. There is a 5% platform fee. Now, this isn't taken unless the campaign on your project is successful. There's more information on that hyperlink there as well. Stripe account setup and transaction fees apply to every single campaign that comes through on the platform. There are ways to kind of attract volunteers through your campaign as well. So again, around, boosting the profile of your project is really great when you're able to kind of get more people involved in the delivery of your campaign at the other end of it. And, again, charities can collect gift aid as well on pledges that come through to their online raise. Pre-campaign and offline funds can also be added to your campaign. These are exempt from the platform fee as well. So if you add anything on to your campaign at the very start of your project before you've even launched, none of that will be, the fee won't apply to those. And it's a really, really great way of kind of demonstrating to the council as well that you've already got, a huge amount of community backing behind your project. Next slide, please, George. So just a little bit more around the support that we have for project creators. So again, as mentioned, all those hyperlinks kind of lead you back to the Help Centre, which provides really great step-by-step video guides and articles around how to build your campaign, how to run a really, really great crowdfunding campaign, how to smash your target. We also, host live chats, workshops, project surgeries, and email support to connect with our team of crowdfunding experts. And the third point is really, really relevant, and I think it might be really useful for some of you who kind of are nervous about the process of crowdfunding, but we can connect you with previous project creators who've ran similar projects, and so you can kind of tap into that really, really specialist guidance about how to build a really great campaign and achieve those goals. Thanks so much, George. That's all from us, but thanks so much. Thanks for the opportunity to speak today, and we're happy to pick up any conversations after the event.
Thank you so much, Kinza. Really enjoyed that. I love the platform. I think it's really cool, that supporting people that haven't crowdfunded before and then linking them up with local authorities and other funders. I think it's really awesome. Just a quick clarification question from me. Can people still fundraise if there's not a partner in their region?
Yes, definitely. So, for example, we don't have partner areas in certain parts of the UK yet, but that's not to say that project creators can't come through and still crowdfund anyway. There is absolutely, you can come through and start building a crowd there. You can tap into local businesses, help them to kind of fund your campaign. There's no kind of barriers there for local authority areas that we don't have yet. But yeah, definitely.
Awesome, thank you. And as Kinza mentioned, Frank is on the call. So if there are any local authorities in the northeastern Yorkshire that want to learn more about it, do send a direct message to Frank. So with that, we're going to go into breakout groups now, and we will be actually, I think maybe we're ahead of schedule. Sorry, I'm struggling to see my agenda. I think we'll go into breakout groups now, and then we will come back at 10 past. For the rest of the session. If there are any questions that I haven't answered yet, we do have some time for questions at the end, and I will make sure that I pick up on all of those questions that I can see in the chat. So Hannah, if you'll put it into the breakout groups now. Hello everyone, welcome back to the main session. I hope your breakout groups were a useful opportunity to meet your fellow participants. We had some really interesting discussions in ours about how to vet possible installers and things like that. So we're going to have a quick 5-minute break now. So I'll see you all back here, and it'll be true to my word of 5 minutes. So I'll see you all back here at 17 minutes past. So that is 5 minutes. Welcome back, everyone. Hope you had enough time. 5 minutes probably isn't quite enough time to comfortably get yourself a cup of tea, so apologies for that. Before we kick off with the next presentation, I just wanted to see whether Connor is on the call and able to speak. I know you had some sound issues earlier on. Say hello if you're there, Connor.
Hello.
Hello. Connor, is this a good time for you to introduce yourself and tell everyone?
Yeah. So hello, I'm Connor Edwards. I'm a local system planning engineer within the Regional Insights and Sustainability branch of the business. I just really want to address upon what Northern Powergrid is doing is advancing the support of community energy, and also our commitment to decentralising our network whilst ensuring equity. So just give a little bit of background about Northern Powergrid. We cover both Yorkshire and the North East, and our primary aim is just to distribute energy from generation to the end consumer. So what are we really doing in regards to sort of advancing support for community energy? So currently the team I sit within, we provide sort of interim support. However, we do have a commitment to have more of a dedicated team to support community energy projects. However, at the interim, we're here to sort of help you understand the connection pipeline and how you can sort of expedite your connections as well through that. So just going on about sort of recent initiatives that currently Northern Powergrid are doing to help support sort of community energy projects. So the team I sit within, sort of the Regional Insights team, we're currently supporting the next phase of the distribution future energy scenarios. So that's our forecasting model where we do our network development after. So we'll identify what sort of loads are currently on our network, future demands up until 2050, so that net zero cutoff, and then being able to sort of coordinate that with our end stakeholders to create this more holistic network plan to understand where our stakeholders need the potential demand, and then how we can develop our network in accordance with that. So for that, if there are any sort of significant plans with anyone on this call, just reach out to myself. That's connor.edwards@northernpowergrid.com, or we do have a combined inbox called leap@northernpowergrid.com, or we'd be happy to discuss your plans and how we can sort of accommodate them within our network development plans as well. Also, part of my team will help support post-application with mass LCTs projects, and also trying to utilise some lessons that we've learned from previous projects, such as with Wakefield District Housing, who have recently sort of applied for a mass PV installation on a lot of their social housing stock, and we sort of support them with expediting that connection agreement as well. And also we are utilising flexibility services on our network. So essentially flexibility service is sort of allowing for that localised generation and also that demand side response to help sort of mitigate both reinforcement and constraints locally within the network. So that could either be congestion or sort of those voltage deviations from the integration of more renewable generation on our network, causing that voltage instability. Also, we have a community DSO project, what's currently received 14.5 million in funding via the Electricity Network Innovation Competition, so the NIC funding, and it's also been supported by Ofgem. So the aims is to develop and trial a different approach to helping identify communities and local stakeholders that can work with the local distribution network operator to deploy sort of more local smart energy systems, and ultimately trying to enable communities to be able to regulate their own energy usage. So ultimately behind the substation, it'd be an implementation of a marketplace whereby communities will be able to do sort of local generation or demand side response within their community, and ultimately try and regulate their own energy usage to have as least impact on the grid, and sort of also enabling that sort of decentralisation of the grid as well. And some of the future goals, like I hinted upon before, there is plans for a specialised team to be formed for the purpose of community energy. So currently we have an individual who's dealing with community energy called Jane Watson. I don't believe she's on this call, but she's currently sort of dealing with that stakeholder relations with a lot of the community energy projects and sort of having that insight into the company. And just to address upon sort of what I was talking about, our commitments to help and decentralise our network whilst also ensuring equity. But like I say, this community DSO project ultimately will allow sort of these prosumers to develop this ultimately their own sort of network. I would say it's hard to describe because it is very sort of a high level, not high level, but it's very theoretical. And it's currently we're going through this sort of trial and discovery phase of understanding what this project will scope out. But we are currently in phase 1. We've got 3 phases, so we'll be going out to tender for phase 2 and phase 3. But like I say, it's sort of decentralising our network, allowing communities to regulate their own energy usage as well. And then, like I say, we are utilising flexibility to help improve local resilience and help mitigate network reinforcements within an area. So, like I say, with demand-side response, if there's an area with quite significant constraints and you can provide that flexibility service, there is an income that you'll be received. So you essentially you'll bid into a contract with us, so this bilateral contract, and then we'll just essentially tell you when to curtail your energy usage or when we want to receive more generation to help mitigate these constraints and ultimately sort of do what the transmission does in their marketplace with that supply and demand. But yeah, that's I just wanted to say hello to you all, and if you do need any support, please feel free to reach out to myself or that shared inbox that I'll say, and I'll post it in the chat now as well, so no one will have to try and decipher what my name is.
Thank you so much, Connor. Yeah, it's really, really helpful and really useful to hear about some of the background going on at Northern Powergrid as well. So we'll move on to the next presentation now. I'm going to be hearing from Paul Fair from Energy for All about share offers. Just give me a moment to get your slides up, Paul. There we go. Can everyone see? Can you see them, Paul?
Yeah, I can see them. Thank you. So, hi, I'm Paul Fair from Energy for All. So you've heard about grant funding from Adele, you've heard about crowdfunding from Kinza, and I'm going to talk to you about community shares. And that's community shares through community benefit society ownership. So just first of all, before I go into it, it's quite often that there's a handful of people that have invested in Energy for All co-ops in any gathering like this. So if you have invested in an Energy for All co-op, perhaps you could just raise your hand so we can see how many of us are here. How many have we got? I can't actually see the numbers.
I saw a few actual hands fly up.
Actual hands, good.
Definitely a few, yeah.
So we've been around. Great. So we've been around a while. Energy for All was created in 2002 from the first community-owned wind farm, or first community-owned project in the UK. And we've done a few projects in our time now. If you go to the next slide, you'll see that we have about 35, it should be, societies now in operation throughout the UK that we've supported. And they range in everything from solar farms to we've got 14 wind farms, we've got 150 rooftop projects, 9 hydro schemes, a solar farm and a biomass heating network. And all these organisations that Energy for All has helped to create are members of Energy for All. They actually own Energy for All. So we are a cooperative of community energy cooperatives, if you like. Next slide, please. So why community shares? So I'm just going to go through a few misconceptions about community shares. So first of all, they are really for project finance, not for development capital. The earlier risky stages of project development, sort of pre-planning stages, that's riskier finance, and this is why there's the Community Energy Fund available to take that risk on communities' behalf, because from our own experience, we know that communities don't like to risk their own money. Community shares are really raising the money to build the project once it's got through that stage. So why community shares then rather than the other options? Because it's easy? Definitely not. Raising money through community shares is quite a long, laborious process. It requires a lot of hard work to put into the share offer, which I'll go through in a minute. You've got to make sure that what you're offering the public is fair and equitable, and what you're describing in that share offer is accurate. And also another misconception is that it's cheap money. It's obviously not as cheap as a grant, because grants are free. But people who invest in projects, you've got to be aware that there are other places people can put their money. There's ISAs, there's savings accounts. You're in that kind of world really, and you kind of have to compete with that. And also you're asking people to take a bit more risk than those sorts of savings accounts. And so therefore you kind of have to attract them with a little bit more share interest. So that needs to be kept in mind. Because everyone else does it. I mean, it is the most common way of raising capital for community energy projects all over Europe. It's been around the longest. Cooperatives are a very well-known and well-established form of legal entity that people trust because it's got a long tradition and it's built up that trust. So yeah, it's there to use for everyone, and everyone has got a lot. There is a lot of experience of everyone using it, so you do have that to fall on. But there are certainly other options, as you've seen. There's options this morning that we've heard about, grants and crowdfunding. So yeah, there are other options out there. But what community shares do, and I think people don't necessarily think about the softer sides of community shares, and that's like how much it really does engage your community, because when people put their money into something, they really they want to make sure that it's gonna work. So that definitely brings a lot more people into your project, and it makes people a lot more involved in your project. And the group of people taking the project forward, they've got a big learning curve to go through. Often, people have all sorts of different levels of experience when they come into a community energy project. By the time they've left, they have definitely learned a lot. And the process of raising shares is a very good part of building that capacity. And the accountability is very important as well, because when you've got an invested membership in your project, you are accountable to them. You aren't using public money. You've definitely got people you might even be seeing in the street every day putting their money in your project. And I think that definitely focuses people's minds on what they're doing. And it is a local business. It is for the local community, and often community benefit societies, all the profits generated by the society is for community benefit. So the harder that project works, the more efficiently that generates its income, the better off the community will be. So I think another very key point about community energy societies and raising shares, because basically what you're doing is you're inviting people to invest in equity in your project. And equity is a lot more flexible than debt. If you've got a loan, or if you've gone out with a crowdfunder that's based on some sort of loan agreement, then that debt usually has to be paid on a fixed amount, on a fixed term. Equity is not like that. When someone invests in equity in a project, when they invest in shares, they take the risk. They're going along for the ride. If the project doesn't do well, they don't do well. So that definitely creates a much more a closer relationship between you and the finance that you're bringing into your project. Next slide, please. So here's an example of a share offer. This is a share offer that I was personally involved in. I think you can see me there, just to the left of the centre, and that's my dog. This was a share offer that we launched in Northern Ireland about 10 years ago, and it was 6 single wind turbines. And the key thing we would say when you're launching a share offer is to tell a good story. It's absolutely vital to engage people through why you're doing this, what it's all about, what's the purpose, what are the profits for the project going to be. And this is where the share offer really comes into its own, because you're telling a story. You're saying to people, you know, we're doing this project, this is why we're doing it. And, you know, when you're writing a share offer with a community energy society, what you're doing is you're using something that's been very hard won by the cooperative sector over the years, and that's the right to raise money from the public without going through all the strenuous regulations that any private company would have to go through. You could write your share offer on the back of a fag packet and send it around the local pub and raise your money that way. That's very legitimate. But what we've done, Energy for All, having pioneered community energy in the UK, and when the first share offers went out, they were absolutely made sure that they did go through the kind of rigor that any commercial share prospectus might go through. So we've definitely made sure that there's a very good tradition of making sure that the share offer not just tells a good story, but tells the reader, the potential investor, exactly how the project is working and what risks they're taking. Next slide. So risk, explaining what the risks are is a very important part of what the share offer is all about, because people, when they're giving you money, they need to know what risks they're taking. This isn't like an ISA. This isn't like putting money in the bank account and having it guaranteed by the government. You are putting your money into a project, and projects come with risk. So, the share offer has to very much state those risks, and it's very important that people understand what their money is being used for. So you've got to be very clear about the facts, and as you can see there, we're listing what they are. So next slide, please. And of course, what's important to a lot of people, the story is important, the risks they're taking obviously are very important, but the other thing to let people know about is what's going to happen to what return they might get on their investment, because they are doing this often for ethical reasons. Often they want to see the project happen, but in order to give you the money that you need, they want to be fairly certain that they're going to get some sort of return. So you really have to explain in the document what the level of return they're going to receive, and that's got to be based on a very rigorous business model that you're fairly certain that you're going to be able to achieve, and that all goes in the share offer. Okay, next slide. So how do you get started on the community share offer, and should you do one? So it depends, I think, a lot where you are in the development cycle. If you're at the beginning of the project, like I said, you need different type of capital. You need risk money, and that's where you go to community energy fund, or if there are other sources of funding out there for the early stages of development. So if you've got to the stage where you've got your planning consent, you've got your grid connection, you've got all your permits and licenses and everything else you need, you've done your surveys, that's when you get involved with raising capital, because all that information goes into the share offer document. That's you de-risking your project. So with your business model, you've got to be sure that what's in your business model is, as far as you can ascertain at that point, is what you're going to deliver. So you've got to be sure before you get started on a share offer. And then you've got a question to ask yourself: do I do this myself? Because any community group, like I said, they could write it on the back of a cigarette packet and raise the money that way. Or should you work with a partner? So this is where the likes of Energy for All, and there are others out there that could support your group in helping you raise that money. They will charge you for it, of course, but you get all the benefit of the experience they have with raising money. And if you're working with an organisation such as Energy for All, it shouldn't really be considered as a service to help you raise money. It should be considered as a partnership, because we don't just raise the money and leave you alone. We raise the money and offer services to your organisation to make sure that what was in that share offer is going to be delivered to your members, because there's a business to run and all the services required to run that business are available. You could go to a bank. So you come back to this this issue of equity versus debt, and I wanted to make that point again because it's a really important one. There is flexibility in equity that you don't get with debt. So if your project does run into trouble, especially in the early years, you've got a hopefully supportive group of members that will take you through those difficult times. And also, you've got to think about the scale of your project. If you're doing a small scale local community project on your local community halls, let's say, this type of project, community shares on the sort of scale we're talking about here, with a partner like Energy for All, that wouldn't work for you because basically you couldn't afford it. But if you did want small amounts of money, probably grants are the best way. If you wanted to maintain control of your organisation within a small group of people, then perhaps debt going to the bank and getting your money that way might be a better option for you. So next slide, please. So basically that's me. But what I'd like to leave you with a few key thoughts about community shares. I mean, first of all, if you're going to do community shares, you need some motivation. If you're going to do community energy at all, you need some motivation to get through all the challenges you're going to face. There's a lot of work to do to go out there to get people involved in your project, and that requires a lot of perspiration as well. And the other thing is a good story. I mean, generally every community energy project I've ever come across has a good story because it involves people. It involves people trying to do something really great in their community. So it's really making sure that story gets out there to your community and they really get to understand why you're doing it, because that will give you all the support and money that you need, really, hopefully, to get your project going. And then, I would say this, but work with Energy for All, work with a partner, work with an organisation that's experienced in all this, because raising money from the public, it's not an easy thing to do. The share offer is quite a lot to take on, and the business model that backs it up. And then there's the communications and marketing resources that you kind of need to raise the money. So if you are looking at projects, especially projects of scale where you need to raise a lot of money beyond this sort of community that that you've got around you, then definitely work with a partner. And Google Energy for All. The website's there. You'll see all the stuff we've done. But if you Google, you'll find a lot of stories about all the work we've done. If you don't know about us already. So that's me.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Paul. That was really excellent. So clearly so much experience with delivering these share offers, and really appreciate you sharing your insights with us. If anyone wants to know any more, I think, Paul, if you can keep an eye on the chat, if anyone has any questions for Paul, pop them in there. Reach out to Paul if you have any further questions about Energy for All and what they do. We're going to move straight on to Abby from the North Eastern Yorkshire Net Zero Hub. Are you there, Abby?
Yes, I'm here.
Good stuff. Take it away.
Perfect, thank you. So as George mentioned, I'm from the North Eastern Yorkshire Net Zero Hub, and I'm going to talk a little bit today about the Community Energy Fund and how you can strengthen your applications for the next round. Next slide, please, George. Thank you. So we are one of 5 hubs across England. We're all funded by the Department for Energy Security and Net Zero, or DESNES, or the department as some people call them, because it is quite a mouthful. You can see on the map to the right or the left, however it is on your screen, the different regions that we cover. So the North Eastern Yorkshire covers all the way from the Scottish border down to sort of South Yorkshire, across to Hull and East Yorkshire, and back across to West Yorkshire. So we do cover quite a vast region. And within our region, we're split into 6 LEP or combined authority regions as well. So the aims of the hubs are to attract commercial investment into projects, to increase the number, quality and scale of local net zero projects being delivered across the region, to develop and support net zero elements to wider programmes and initiative across England, to support a national knowledge transfer programme and improve information sharing, and to raise local awareness of opportunities for and the benefits of local net zero investment. Like I say, we are only from the North East and Yorkshire here on the call today, but there are hubs in the North West, the Midlands, the Greater South East and the South West as well, who are all delivering the Community Energy Fund, which I'll move on to just now. Next slide, please. So Lisa's already spoken a little bit about the Community Energy Fund, so I won't go into too much detail, but as she mentioned, it is a £10 million grant scheme for urban and rural communities to develop community energy projects. It does have quite a lot of similarities to the Rural Community Energy Fund that was delivered a couple of years ago, but there are a few key differences which I'll run through in a moment. Primarily, the scheme's in place to support local renewable and low carbon energy projects. So these could be wind turbines, hydropower, rural heat networks, solar panels, sort of your usual low carbon technologies. It's also different to the RCEF programme is that we can support community electrical vehicle programmes as well, such as community charging points or car clubs. We can also support what we're calling Type B projects, which for feasibility, which are energy efficiency retrofit advice projects. So similar to the local energy advice demonstrator programs that are also ongoing in the region. So they could be available for stage 1 funding as well. Funding is for the development only of projects, so it isn't for any sort of capital works at all. We have stage 1, which is for feasibility projects, and stage 2, which is for development up until the point of being investor or building ready. It's really important to note that all projects should ensure that there's at least 50% community ownership of the project or the end asset. So that's a bit of a difference from the Rural Community Energy Fund. There is quite a lot of strict guidelines around that one. And the fund in general just aims to remove barriers to investment that are currently preventing the development of community scale projects. Next slide, thank you. So in terms of eligible organisations, there is a list on the screen there. If you don't feel like your organisation falls into the list, but you do think you'd like to discuss if you are eligible, please get in touch. In a couple of slides' time, there is our inquiries email address, in which we'd be happy to sort of chat through any proposals or eligibility questions with you as well. I won't read them out because I'm sure that'd be really boring. So next slide, please, George. As I mentioned, we now have Type A and Type B projects. So Type A projects are sort of your standard feasibility and development for the installation of a renewable energy technology. So as you can see, there's quite a long list on the screen of exactly what is eligible to look into. However, we will be aware that there will be some more innovative or newer technologies that aren't on that list. So if there's anything else you'd like to discuss at all, again, please get in touch. I've seen that someone's just popped our inquiries email in the chat. So we're happy to sort of talk about anything that isn't on that list as well, but obviously your sort of standard solar, air source heat pumps, hydropower, wind power, battery storage, they are all eligible for stage 1 and stage 2 funding. Next slide, please. In terms of our Type B projects, which are new for the Community Energy Fund, like I said, they're energy efficiency or advice projects. So they do need to have specific targets, and you do need to prove there is a real need for them in the area. They are to either target fuel poor households or ones that are available to all households, but that does need to obviously show that need of why it's specific for that area. It can also include bulk buy schemes for energy efficiency measures or low carbon heating measures. Any other sort of energy efficiency retrofit programs are potentially eligible, and we just encourage you to have a chat with us about those. And yeah, as it says, on a sort of case-by-case basis, we will have a national approach. So if you get in touch about something we've not really thought about before, we might need to go and sort of speak to the other hubs and speak up to DESNZ about it. But hopefully we can sort of include a lot of things that we've just not thought of yet, because we are trying to encourage innovation. Next slide, please, George. So to compare stage 1 and stage 2 a little bit, like I said, stage 1 projects are for full feasibility, and stage 2 are for more detailed project development. So through stage 1, there's grants available of up to £40,000, whereas in stage 2, the grants are available of up to £100,000. You do need to bear in mind UK subsidy guidelines for these if you're an organisation that would apply to. Stage 1 is for professional support to scope project feasibility, whereas stage 2 is for the professional support to make the project investment ready or construction ready. So this can include sort of grid connection applications, planning applications, consultancy fees, legal advice should you need any sort of heads of terms or land agreements, community engagement activity, shared learning activity, sort of anything you need to do past the point of knowing it's a feasible project to actually then going out for investment or to actually deliver the project. So for stage 1, by the point of completion of your project, we'd expect that you'd have a full feasibility study. And then in stage 2, we'd expect that you've either got the planning permission if it's needed or you've already applied for it. We do know that some of the timescales are quite long to get a response, so as long as the application's in, we're happy. That you'll also have a viable financial model in place and that you'll have secured a grid connection if needed. Again, we are aware that there's long waits for grid connection applications, so as long as the application's submitted, we're usually happy there as well. Keynote is that for type B projects, so these are the energy efficiency and the sort of bulk buy schemes, they are only eligible for stage 1 feasibility funding. They're not eligible for stage 2 funding. Next slide, please, George. So in terms of round 1, the hubs are all on different timelines of when they deliver their rounds. This is usually purely because of when our different board meetings are. All recommendations for funding do have to go through each hub's board and through DESNZ, so it just sort of depends how often your board meetings are for exactly when the rounds are running. But in the North Eastern Yorkshire, we've already had round 1, and we're in the process of sort of grant offer stages for those successful. So we did receive 10 applications. 8 of those were the stage 1 applications for feasibility and 2 were the stage 2 for further development. And within those stage 1s, we had 7 type A projects and 1 type B. The sort of technologies already covered within round 1 were solar PV and solar heating, accompanying battery storage, hydropower and wind power. And overall, we had a grant ask of just shy of £350,000, which, yes, because we're still in contracting stage, I can't say exactly how much we've been able to allocate, but that was the original ask that we have had. So what everybody wants to know is basically how you can make your application a little bit better. So judging from the applications that we received, we've had a little look through and had a look at which questions didn't score particularly highly. So I've picked out 6 questions of the lowest scoring, and I've sort of put on the screen what sort of would get you the full marks, what would get you mid marks, and what would either get you no marks at all or the lowest marks. So for example, within financial management, if you can provide accounts that show no financial difficulties, you've got an obvious track record in managing grant incomes, and you have multiple funding sources identified, you're not just relying on the Community Energy Fund, you would score the full marks. However, if you can't provide any of this, you wouldn't be able to score any marks. We did have a question in our breakout room about how that affects newer organisations that don't have accounts. And unfortunately, it does mean that you would lose a couple of points there. However, this is a sort of national guideline. It's not just within our hub, it is something within the national scoring. So everybody would be in the same boat for that one. And it does just mean that you could milk those points back up in further questions as well. So in terms of the innovation question, for the Community Energy Fund, there is quite a big push from the department for really innovative projects. So sort of the more creative you can be, the better. So if your project is clearly and significantly delivering the innovation as defined by the Energy Systems Catapult, which I did think I had the definition on the screen, but I clearly don't, then that would be full marks. However, if you don't show any support or any evidence that your project is innovative, you would lose marks there. In terms of engaging with the land or site owner, if you've got a site identified and all your relevant owners are positively engaged and you did already have a heads of term or land agreement signed up, you'd get the full, I think it's 4 marks for that question. However, if you've not engaged at all with the landowner, obviously that could be such a big risk to the project, so you would score low on that one. And we do encourage that even if you can't get full permissions in place before applying, to just make sure you've had initial conversations, because obviously it is public funding and we'd have more of a risk to the funding should you have not had any conversations at all and are just sort of presuming you can use sort of buildings or sites that you don't own. So please do have as many early conversations before application as possible. 1, so you'll score more highly, and 2, just to make sure you've got a bit more confidence that the project can go ahead. In terms of planning advice, not all projects need planning. So obviously if you don't, you wouldn't be sort of scored up or down for this project, you'd very much not lose marks just because you didn't need planning, so you couldn't score. However, if you do have planning permission already in place, that'd be full marks, sort of green flag along for the project. We know that a lot of projects won't either have the funds or have had the ability yet to apply for planning, so you can still score quite highly just by already having a conversation with your local authority planning team to make sure that they're not just 100% opposed to the idea. So you can still score quite highly even if you don't have that in place already. However, if you've not engaged at all with your local planning authority, or if they have indicated that they wouldn't be happy with it going ahead, then obviously you can score quite low on that one. Community engagement is huge for the Community Energy Fund because obviously we want the benefits of these projects to go back into the community. So if your project's already been developed and approved within your local community, you'll score much more highly than if you haven't tried to engage at all with your project, or if your community has shown some sort of opposition to wanting the project to go ahead, you could lose some marks there as well. And in terms of the procurement process, we do always encourage that all projects go through a full formal procurement process and go out for 3 quotes to ensure they're receiving value for money. So if you've gone out for your 3 quotes and you've had a good evaluation of the tenders and you've picked sort of the quote, that's the best value for money, you can score full marks on that one. However, if you've not done a full procurement process, or we can't really see why you've picked the supplier that you've picked, or potentially you've picked not the cheapest quote and you can't explain why, then that's where you'd lose marks as well. So we're not necessarily saying you have to pick the cheapest quote if it doesn't necessarily look like it would be the best supplier for you. But if you don't, we'd like to see in your application why you haven't, even if it's just they had more experience, you've worked with them in the past and you know they're really good, word of mouth, things like that, just to support why you didn't pick the lowest priced quote. We've had quite a lot of inquiries about the fund, as you can imagine, from when it was first announced back in, I think it was last summer, to when we were actually able to launch in the winter. So we've sort of had a look through of what our most frequently asked questions are. Obviously, there'll have been hundreds more, but these are the ones that people have asked time and time again. So when will the next round open in the North Eastern Yorkshire? We did actually open on Monday for applications. So we will have a 2-month application window, so people are able to submit applications until midnight on the 5th of May. That does mean midnight as in 12 p.m. on the 5th, as opposed to some people think it's the midnight sort of before the 5th starts, so just to clear that one up for people. We have had a question about whether more than one application per organisation would be accepted, and the answer is yes. So if a community group has already received funding, they may apply again for a different project on a different site. And then they would be eligible for the full stage 1 and stage 2 allowance, as long as obviously they abide by the subsidy control requirements. You can apply for 2 sort of stage 1 or stage 2 projects on 2 different sites, providing you do have the capacity to deliver both and you're not going to stretch your resource too thin. And also, if you've previously had RCEF funding or similar funding for sort of feasibility work, we could take into account that, for example, had you had £20,000 of stage 1 funding through RCEF, you could still have up to 20,000 through CEF to make up to that full 40,000 sort of bracket. But if you have any questions at all, please get in touch and we can sort of look at it on a case-by-case basis to ensure you know exactly what you can still apply for. I sort of answered this a bit earlier, but can applications be permitted without auditing accounts? Yes, like I said, you may score a little bit lower on the financial management question, but you can definitely pick up those scores later on in the application, and it wouldn't make you ineligible just because you can't provide those. We have had a lot of questions about hydrogen projects. We didn't have any submitted in round 1 at all, but we're definitely open to them, and we would encourage you to discuss these with the hub prior to application if you do have any questions at all. The programme itself runs until March 2025, so we'll be having hopefully another round as well before then. However, if you are successful for funding, you do get 12 months to deliver from the date that you're issued your funding offer. So just because, for example, the window closes in May doesn't mean you then only get 12 months from May. It's from when you actually would get your funding offer letter. So we've tried to optimise as much time for delivery as possible. Even if that 12 months takes you past the point of March 2025, you're still entitled to the 12 months of delivery. Next slide, please, George. We've had a few questions about whether town councils can lead a bid. So the answer is yes, they absolutely can, and they would be able to be fully eligible to claim back the costs of what they need. However, it is worth noting, local authorities can lead a bid, but they'll only be able to claim back formally required fees, such as planning application fees. So they couldn't claim back any staff time or anything like that. Again, I've mentioned what we'd prefer for procurement and what would score you the top marks. So if you can collect 3 quotes to ensure value for money, that would be preferred. You're not going to completely lose points if you can't do this, like I've mentioned, but we just need to be really clear in your application form why you haven't gone down that process and why you've chosen the supplier that you have. It is possible to apply for just stage 2 funding as long as you're an eligible organisation and your eligibility for stage 2 is met. You will need to have had a full technical feasibility study done to then be eligible for stage 2. This can have been through, for example, RCEF or our Energy Project Enabling Fund or other funds out there, or you can have just done it yourself, but it would need to be up to the standard of a professional feasibility study to be able to then go on for stage 2. But you are more than welcome to just apply for stage 2. You don't have to go through the feasibility study again. We have had many questions asking if we have a list of providers or consultants that we can point people in the direction of. As it stands, the hub can't recommend specific contractors or consultants. We do have to remain very neutral. However, we are able to link you up with other applicants that have done it in the past who may be able to advise on specific contractors to reach out to for your quotes. And it is worth noting that recently the Midlands hub are looking to create a dynamic purchasing system in which it will be accessible to everybody across England, I think, to be able to sort of look at contractors and use their tendering process through that DPS, so that we're still not saying who you should use, but if they pass the checks to be on the DPS, then obviously we're confident they'd be able to do the job well, so people can use that. They are hoping that it will be set up to start inviting contractors to be a part of it by April, and then hopefully accessible for use by the summer, but we'll sort of share updates about that as soon as we can. And finally, sorry, one more, George. People have asked if private estates are eligible for the Community Energy Fund. Excuse me, and the answer is potentially. It's very much on a case-by-case basis, and this is one of the ones where we'd really encourage you to get in touch with us first, because if the project and the final asset would be 50% community owned, then you would be eligible. However, because it's a private site, there is a few more complexities. So we just want to mention that you're not completely ruled out, but please chat with us before you do apply to make sure you don't put a lot of time into an application to then be disappointed.
Abby, we are reaching the end of the session, so if you're able to wrap up in about 30 seconds.
Yes, sorry.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. So as I've mentioned, round 2 is currently opened, and we do hope to do a 3rd round, but just sort of keep an eye on our website and our socials for that one. Next slide, please, George. I was going to run through exactly what happens after your application, but this is included on the guidance documents which are on our website, which we've got a link to, so please have a good read through that, and if you do have any questions, or just reach out to the email on the next slide. In terms of reporting, we do ask for monthly reports to myself, just so I can report back up to DESNZ, because as Lisa mentioned, it's really, really important that they hear feedback and see how projects are going, so we can try and push for further funding. The hub will offer as much support as it can. So we have our website and our inquiries email just there, which you can get in touch with if you have any questions at all, and we're happy to sort of have pre-meets before application stage. On the next slide, you can see the community energy team. We're all on the call today. So there's myself, who's the project manager and the community energy lead. Sue is a new role who we've just recruited to offer more on-the-ground support for groups, so she can help with bid writing, linking up, advising, and much more than we've been able to offer in the past. So please do reach out to her, even if you're not looking to apply, she can just support. And Emma also helps with the admin of the fund as well. On the next slide, we have our regional project managers. I think a couple of them are on the call today. We have one for each of our regions, which I've mentioned. We are currently recruiting for the York and North Yorkshire position, but obviously their emails are on the slide and you'll receive those as well, so you can get in touch with them directly about a bit more regionally focused support, and they have really good links in with the local authorities as well. If you are in York and North Yorkshire, please just email our inquiries inbox at the minute, because like I say, we're recruiting, so we'll give you the support from there. And my final slide was just some key takeaways from the day. Please have a good read through them when you get these slide decks, because they're the most important things to remember when you're applying. And it's 12 o'clock now. Sorry for running over, George.
No worries. No, I think it was my chairing that's made things go slightly awry. So no worries at all. Thank you very much for that, Abby. That was super insightful, and yeah, like really good to be able to get a bit of an understanding about how to strengthen those applications. So thank you. Sorry that we've run out of time for questions. Before you all go, I'm just going to launch the Zoom poll to get some feedback for you, and there should be up on your screen now. Whilst you're doing that, just to mention, if there are any questions that have been that haven't been answered, I will try and pick them up in the chat and then get some answers over to you after this event. And if there's anything else you want to be answered, feel free to send me an email and I can try and get an answer for you. So hopefully everyone has been able to access the poll. That just leaves me to say thank you all for coming. Thank you for participating. We had some really good discussions in the breakouts. Yeah, really, I hope that you've got what you wanted out of it. The slides will be sent round, so if it's all moved a bit too fast, you'll have some time to go back and look at them. Huge thanks to all the speakers, so much insight shared, and yeah, really grateful for that. And of course, thank you to all the Regen team that have helped in the breakouts, and of course to Connor and the rest of the Northern Powergrid team for helping this session to happen. That's everything. Sorry we've overrun slightly. Thanks again for attending, and goodbye.